When peace like a river attendeth my way, when sorrows like sea billows roll, whatever my lot thou hast taught me to say, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul, It is well with my soul. Blessed, oh, the bliss of this glorious thought, my sin not in part, but the whole is nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more. Praise the Lord, oh my soul. It is well with my soul, with my soul. It is well with my soul. And Lord, haste the day when my face shall be sight, the clouds be rolled back as a scroll, the trump shall resound, and the Lord shall descend. Even so, it is well with my soul. It is well with my soul, It is well with my soul.
Welcome, God's beloved. It is an honor to hold space for this celebration of life and to convey gratitude from the grateful congregation of Salem First Christian Church. a congregation which, on the day in our worship service here, that we lit a memorial candle and shared the news of the passing of Marilynn, there was a collective audible sigh in the sanctuary space. Thank you for being here. We come together today to honor the life and legacy of Marilynn May Carlisle. We gather with gratitude for her presence in the world, for what she meant to us, and for what life meant to her. May our words have tones of gratitude. May our hearts feel the power of love. And may the atmosphere of this sacred space hold a deep trust in life's good purposes. Welcome. I invite you to be in a spirit of prayer with me. God of love and compassion, we open our hearts to your presence, and we give thanks for the life we honor today. Be with us as we celebrate Marilynn's life on her birthday, in this service and in the fellowship that follows. Laugh with us, cry with us, comfort and keep us today and in the days to come. Amen.
My grandma was truly my most ardent champion in life. I had the great blessing of being her oldest grandchild, with my sister and I being her only grandchildren for the first 10 years of my life. Grandma was one of the key people who nurtured me into who I am today. Every milestone through the years contains a memory of Grandma. She took me to my first music lessons before I was even in kindergarten. I actually have memories of those classes, with her sitting by my side at the keyboard every week. Going to her house was something magical and never failed to calm whatever was stressing me. Meals there always included my favorite comfort food, spaghetti, though with a side of cottage cheese and peas thrown in for good measure. When my girls were little, she delivered that same spaghetti, both for them and for me. As an adult, I realized that I picked up a few of my grandma's driving habits from all of those years she spent driving me to or from school and lessons. Those habits include folding my hands in my lap when stopped at a stoplight and saying a quick prayer to Jesus whenever I merge onto the freeway. The first time I drove over to Central Oregon, Grandma was my one and only fearless passenger. Grandma was always a fan of helping me with school projects. When I started taking drama classes in high school, she arranged to take me to several local plays. In college, email was a fairly new development, and I used it to email every paper I wrote to Grandma and Grandpa. Before turning it in, I would call them with my prepaid phone card, because I did not have a cell phone, and we would discuss the concepts of my paper and possible revisions with both of them on speakerphone chiming in with their thoughts. And Grandma and Grandpa actually chauffeured my now husband and I to one of our high school formals in Portland, surprising us with a swanky dinner on the way. And then years later, they hosted our engagement party. But in thinking about memories to share, one stood out because it involves my grandma's laugh. She had an amazing ability to find humor in just about every situation, and would frequently find it hard to stop laughing, pulling out a tissue to wipe the laughter tears from her eyes. But you were never being laughed at. Rather, her laugh pulled you in to be present in the moment with her and share something special. When I was in 5th grade, Grandma was one of the chaperones on my school field trip to see the tide pools at the coast. I was so worried about Grandma slipping and falling and kept asking her to be careful. But I was so busy watching her that I did not watch out for myself and ended up falling backwards into a tide pool. Hearing the splash, my grandma turned around, as did all of my classmates, and then my grandma laughed hard. And so did I. In her words, she found it so funny that it was me in that tide pool instead of her. And what could have been a traumatic, life-altering, embarrassing situation for a fifth grader was diffused as all of my classmates turned to watch my grandma laughing at me. She did eventually fish me out of the tide pool, but all attention was on the fun grandma on the bus ride home, not the sopping wet fifth grader sitting beside her. And I see what an amazing gift that was now, to be able to bring people to the core of the moment, to the joy of the moment, and to make them feel safe and loved, even with just a laugh. I am forever grateful that I had so many years to bask in that love of my grandma.
My grandma was 44 years, 3 months, and 13 days old when I was born. When she passed away, I was exactly that same age, 44 years, 3 months, and 15 days. We shared exactly half of her lifetime down to the day. She was there the day I was born, and I was with her for her last breath. It feels fitting because so much of who I am is shaped by the time we shared together. The last few years, I've wanted wind chimes. I've always loved their sound, and I realized it was because of Grandma. At their house on Arrow Street, wind chimes hung outside the kitchen window on the upstairs deck. I can still hear them catching the breeze while we cooked and baked in the kitchen together. Maybe it's not the wind chimes themselves that carry the deepest meaning, but what they remind me of, the countless hours spent in that kitchen with my grandma. It's hard to pick just one memory because really, it's thousands of little moments in the kitchen, cooking, laughing, the scent of something baking, and the sound of her voice. They all blend together and left such a deep imprint that even now I can still see it, smell it, and feel it as if I were right there. I can imagine opening the big, heavy pantry door and seeing the shelves crammed full of ingredients to choose from. And I remember how she'd leave the top half of the back door open so the fresh breeze could come in through the screen door. The round wooden table that sat at the back of the kitchen, always topped with a floral tablecloth. Grandma and I spent hours at the kitchen counter, making cookies, cooking dinner, flipping through cookbooks to choose our next recipe. We worked our way through McCall's Best Cookie Recipes book, jotting down our changes as we went and checking off the ones we'd made. I looked through it the other day, and we made it through nearly all of them, just a handful left untried. Some were altered so much they were basically new recipes now. We almost always swapped walnuts for raisins, and really, why use just half a cup of chocolate chips or carob chips when a full cup made things so much better? Grandma had a big collection of aprons, kind of a hodgepodge of patterns and styles hanging on the side of the refrigerator, and I always loved picking one out to wear. Her kitchen felt like a treasure trove of gadgets, a hand crank egg beater, a salad spinner that seemed like magic, a big KitchenAid stand mixer, and an under cabinet electric can opener that I thought was the coolest. The best part, I got to use all of them, and she let me mix, spin, scoop, and stir right alongside of her. I loved going grocery shopping with her, heading to Fitz for fresh fish and Trapp's produce stand in West Salem for the best fruit and vegetables. But more than anything, I just loved being with her. She poured so much time and love into teaching me how to be creative in the kitchen and how it could be a place of calm and joy. I learned that cooking could still my heart. Every time I pull out her yellow Pyrex bowl, I feel her presence. Now I have a wind chime of my own hanging outside my kitchen window, and every time I hear it, it fills my heart with the same peaceful and warm feeling I had all those years in the kitchen with her.
Hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Kevin Carlisle's daughter, and I've had the privilege of calling Marilynn Carlisle my grandma. And as I was thinking about what to say, I was reflecting on who Grandma was, and I couldn't help but remember her joy and her love and all of the ways that she actively supported not only me, but my sister and my cousins and everyone around her, quite frankly. She worked to actively love those around her. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, well, I know that if everyone had the chance to step up here and share their experiences about my grandma, they would all of their stories, all of their memories would come down to and speak for who she was, which was joyful, gentle-hearted, kind, pure of heart, and faith-filled. And she always strove to live that out in everything she did. Like, whether she was writing a story or sitting down with me and hearing the story that I was writing, or simply just talking with me, she lived out her faith through her active love that she gave me through listening and being in the moment. And it's those moments that we get to share, to remember her by, and hold close, because when we step out of these doors, not only us as a family, but you guys get to share in that legacy that she lived out too, which was actively loving others. And part of her active love, not part, I would say all, came on the foundation of her faith in Jesus Christ. I remember in college, for those of you who don't know, I went to college in California, majored in theater, and I would say that my grandma was probably one of my biggest cheerleaders. And her being the prayer warrior she would always ask me, when are your auditions, when are your tests, when are your flights, when you're coming back? And so I can pray for you. I want to know when your flights are. I want to know where your auditions were. And in a way, it's kind of like she became part of that college experience, because her prayers and me even talking on the phone with her as I'm walking to class and telling her about my auditions became part of life. And it was part of who she was to want to support one another in prayer and in her faith. And that's what she would want us to share in each other too, was that faith that we have in Jesus, that love, that never-ending love that we had in Jesus, her strength that she found in Jesus, because it was no secret that she had many health obstacles in some instances, and yet it didn't rock her faith. In fact, I would say in many instances it actually strengthened her, because she knew at the end of the day all she needed was Jesus. That's all she needed. And so when I think of her, I think of what I want to carry on in her is, like her, my faith in Jesus. And I think one of the tidbits of advice she would say to you would be, root yourself in Jesus. And she would probably quote Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And she would say, trust in Jesus, even if you don't understand. And I think she would also want to encourage you that as we go out, we get to support each other in that same faith. Thank you.
into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. Amen.
Marilyn May Carlisle was born on August 6, 1936 in Sheridan, Oregon, to Lionel and Lucia Jones, joining her older sister Lorraine and brother Nolan to complete their family of 5. As a child, she frequently managed to obtain rides for herself on the handlebars of their bicycles. And as the baby of the family, she greatly looked up to both her brother and sister, keeping a close connection with them and their families through all the years. Marilyn graduated from Salem High School and worked as a legal secretary for attorney Wallace Carson. She met the love of her life, George Carlisle, at a dance, and after marrying, they joyfully made their home in Port Townsend, Washington, and thereafter in LeGrand, Beaverton, Salem, and Monmouth, Oregon. Marilyn held many roles during her life, and we want to share just a few of them with you.
Marilyn as wife. Marilyn and George were together in marriage for almost 67 years. One of George's favorite things about Marilyn is that she could always be counted upon to laugh at his jokes, and they filled their home with regular laughter. Merrily, as George called Marilyn, was the love of his life, and George was the love of hers. Through the decades, they supported each other in work, found hobbies together, including dancing, bowling, and tennis, and they traveled whenever possible, usually centered around being with their children or grandchildren, with some of their most memorable trips being to the Holy Lands and to Hawaii. They were strong partners in raising their 4 children and in supporting their 9 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren.
Marilyn as mother. Marilyn and George had 4 children, their daughter, Carrie Palmer, son, Kevin Carlisle, son, Kelly Carlisle, and daughter, Shelley Katzen. And they opened their arms to their children's spouses, Carrie's husband, Greg, Kelly's wife, Nancy, and Shelley's husband, Paul. Every moment with their children was treasured and embraced with enthusiasm. They showed up for any occasion from their childhood through adulthood and invested in their children's interests and passions. They made friends with their kids' friends, became their youth group leaders, and had an open door for absolutely everyone. They also continued their tradition of laughter, including laughing it off when they forgot to tell one child that they were moving to a different city.
Marilyn as grandmother. Marilyn had 9 grandkids, and like with her children, also treated their spouses as additional grandchildren. Tricia Olson and her husband Troy, Tiffany Carter and her husband Drew, Jeff Carlisle, Timothy Palmer, Taylor Carlisle and his wife Britta, Brianna Blancheville and her husband Austin, Natalie Carlisle and her husband Nathan Brace, Georgie Carlisle, and Kaylin Katzen. She also had 8 great-grandchildren, Madeline Olson, Sydney Olson, Ellie Carter, Jack Carter, Matthew Carter, Wilder Carlisle, Sauve Carlisle, and Avery Blancheville. as well as a 9th great-granddaughter, Lucy May Carter, who preceded her in death. Like with her children, Marilynn invested in every interest and passion of her grandchildren and made a point to be present at their events and special occasions. She established special traditions, such as My Fair Lady weekend for the granddaughters, was known to play basketball with the grandkids, and to participate in extremely competitive games of Monopoly. She never failed to answer her phone for any grandchild who called, returned all texts with lots of special emojis, placed a call to sing happy birthday on every birthday, and was always ready with advice ranging from how to get along with parents to finding the best shopping resources. As for shopping, she was the world's best shopper when it came to her grandkids, finding the best back-to-school clothes at Nordstrom, even if the cost was over the budget that George set, and even managing to fight her way through the crowds in the early 1980s and obtain the first Cabbage Patch doll sold in a Salem toy store.
Marilynn as artist. Marilynn loved to learn new things and never shied away from trying new forms of art, and her house was full of her work, which included painting, sewing, pottery, drawing, writing stories and poems, and creating new recipes. Marilynn was also an early adopter of technology, buying the first Apple computer that came out, and even introducing some of her grandchildren to phone apps she used later in life. She also made sure to subscribe to the Hallmark Channel because Hallmark movies, along with old westerns, were her favorite.
Marilynn as a children's story author. Marilynn entertained her grandchildren with stories she wrote and illustrated about Freddie Frog and Gladly the Bear. Marilynn also co-published the Benji Bird Calendar for children with her dear friend Verda Rubottom, which included stickers to use and wearable illustrated Benji Bird buttons, which even managed to find their way to Portland's Ramblin' Rod cartoon show, courtesy of 2 of her grandchildren.
Marilynn as health and wellness promoter. Taking care of health was important to Marilynn, and for a period of time she sold health supplements and put together suggested supplement rosters for her family. Grandkids who stayed at her house, and even friends of her grandkids, were provided with KM meal replacement bars and KM juice to take with breakfast, even when some grandkids bravely told her that they thought the juice tasted like tree bark. Back when cod liver oil was the go-to supplement for good health, she made sure every grandkid got their share. And if you were brave, you could take your spoonful straight. Otherwise, she would mash it into half of a banana and claim that it would disguise the taste. It did not.
Marilynn as a newspaper published baker. An Easter dinner menu that Marilynn once made with her friend Penny Chereau, which included a giant Easter bunny cake, was featured with photos in the Statesman Journal in the late 1970s. Her cookbooks contained many sticky notes and handwritten notes in the margin, and she always had a stack of new recipes to try. She managed to find ways to put applesauce in just about everything. Cottage cheese and peas were a side at just about every dinner. Pie was almost always offered at dessert, and most of her family will recognize the name Kanafi Giblin. Marilynn also contributed her recipe creations to church cookbooks and once entered a cookie contest with her daughter Carrie. One of them came away with the prize for best looking cookie, and the other came away with the prize for best tasting cookie, though they typically disagreed later on as to who won which prize.
Marilynn as church leader. Marilynn's faith was the foundation of her life, guiding her in all she did. She poured her time and energy into serving in countless ways through several different ministries. She served in the after-school program, the Good News Club, when Shelley was in elementary school. She was an elder at Salem First Christian Church, a Sunday school teacher, and on the youth group leadership team. She also became an interim on staff as the children's director when they needed someone to fill the role. She served on the Oasis Women's Conference Board when her daughter Carrie was the director, and she and George loved researching for, submitting ideas for, and listening to Kevin's sermons. In every role, her love for the Lord and for people shone through, leaving a lasting impact on the hearts that she touched.
Marilynn as prayer warrior. Marilynn was a strong believer in the power of prayer. If you asked her to pray, she prayed faithfully, diligently, and often right there in the moment. But she didn't just stop there with her own prayers. She would activate every prayer chain she could think of, from the church to the 700 Club to Benny Hinn's ministry to the Mount Angel monks. When challenges came, whether in her own life or in the lives of her children and grandchildren, Marilynn's first response was always to pray. Her faith was also rooted in scripture. She read her Bible daily, and when her new Monmouth neighbors asked what her favorite hobbies were, reading her Bible was at the top of her list. One of her habits for several years was reading a proverb each day, finding wisdom in its words no matter how many times she'd read them before. Her favorite verses were Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. In fact, she often used some form of that verse for most of her passwords.
Marilynn as family tradition creator. George and Marilynn put together annual Sun River trips for their family until the early 2000s. Marilynn also started a tradition of family talent shows on those Sun River trips. Later on, most gatherings ended up in family members singing songs, and of course, Marilynn always had a list of songs that she requested Kelly to sing and play on the piano. On grandchildren's 13th birthdays, George and Marilynn would present a special gift, usually accompanied by a fancy dinner out to celebrate the momentous occasion of entering the teenage years. Marilynn's Christmas and Thanksgiving dinners were legendary, and her insistence that everyone stay after Thanksgiving dinner to put up the giant Christmas tree. The Easter egg hunt tradition she started still brings major bragging rights for grandchildren, I never won, who found the most eggs. Her prizes started as Easter egg-shaped cookies and then moved to hidden cash in some of the eggs as her grandkids and great-grandkids got more and more competitive. Running shoes were a requirement along with Easter attire. And every holiday or family dinner began with standing in a circle, holding hands to say a prayer and to sing the Johnny Appleseed prayer song.
Marilynn was surrounded by family at her passing on March 6th of this year. From the beginning to her final day, Marilynn approached life as a gift and lived by the message in Proverbs 3, 5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit to him, and he will make your path straight.
There's no road you could travel, there's no height you could climb, there's no depth of the ocean I wouldn't find you. And even when you are far, I'll chase down your prodigal heart and lead you home in heaven's arms.
I made my bed in the grave, wore a different mask and changed my name. I've learned hide and seek was not my game. He saw right through when I heard him say,
There's no road you could travel, there's no height you could climb, there's no depth of the ocean I wouldn't find you. And even when you are far,
see you on the other side. I'll walk by faith and not by sight.
To you, my King, I owe my life. There's no road you could travel, there's no height you could climb, there's no depth of the ocean I wouldn't find you. Even when you are far, I'll chase down your prodigal heart, lead you home in heaven's arms. I'll lead you home in heaven's arms. I'll lead you home in heaven's arms. 'Cause there's no road you could travel, there's no height you could climb, there's no depth of the ocean I wouldn't find you. Even when you are far, I'll chase down your prodigal heart, lead you home in heaven's arms. I'll lead you home in heaven's arms. Oh, I am home in heaven's arms.
Good morning, everyone. I know many of you, but for those who I haven't met yet, I'm Shelley, the youngest of Marylynn's 4 children. And I just want to thank you for joining all of us here today to celebrate and honor her life. There are so many wonderful words that would be used to describe my mom, but the one I think captures her best is beautiful. She was beautiful in every sense of the word, inside and out. She had a beautiful heart, a beautiful spirit, and a beautiful smile that people always noticed and commented on. Throughout my life, her beautiful presence showed up in so many ways. I remember when I was in 3rd grade and I was struggling to find some friends at school, and every day I was coming home very sad. When Mom realized what was going on, she decided to come to school and eat lunch with me, and she even went outside to recess and played with us. She made quite an impression, quickly winning over some of the popular girls, and after that visit, things began to change, and playdate invitations started coming my way. Looking back, it does make me smile, but it also makes me feel so loved, because my mom cared enough to step into my world and make it better. Another way that Mom made my world and the world of so many others better was through her gift of prayer. I saw firsthand how her prayers and faith changed the course of many difficult situations. If Mom was praying, you just knew things were going to be okay. In fact, friends would often ask, "Can your mom pray for me?" And I always said yes, because Mom took the time to truly pray and would always check up on the person and situation she was praying for. But Mom wasn't just prayerful. She also loved to laugh and have fun, even in the simplest moments. I remember years ago, we were standing in line at the post office. I honestly can't remember what started it, but we got the giggles and couldn't stop. It got to the point where people were looking at us, and we were doing everything we could to pull it together. It was a little embarrassing, but mostly just hilarious. We had fun being together, and I will always cherish those simple times. That warmth and joy followed her wherever she went. Not too long ago, I was talking to her on the phone, and she was in her room at Boone Ridge. Of course, she always had me on the speaker of her phone, and I could hear a bunch of commotion in the hallway. It turned out 2 caregivers were literally racing each other to get to her room first because they both wanted to be the one to help her get ready for bed. The one who got there first ran into Mom's room, slammed the door behind her, and locked it. And I could hear a lot of laughter, including my mom. I think that moment happened because Mom had such a kind heart and because she was genuinely interested in others. She knew about the caregivers' kids, their problems, and if they looked exhausted, she'd offer them a protein bar or a cup of coffee from her Keurig. That was just Mom, always caring, always gracious. That same thoughtfulness and strength of character carried her through the hardest season of her life, when my dad passed away 4 years ago. It was incredibly difficult for her, but she stayed determined to keep going day by day with a positive outlook. She leaned on her faith, her family, and yes, sometimes her Hallmark movies. Those movies brought her comfort and the kind of hopeful endings she loved. Over those 4 years, my husband Paul, our 12-year-old daughter Kaylin, and I made many trips from our home in California to be with her. Some of my favorite memories from that time were simply being together, talking about life, sharing funny memories, especially the ones involving my dad and his quick wit, or watching lighthearted shows on Netflix like Is It Cake? The three of us watched every season of Is It Cake together. It was fun trying to guess which cake was real, and Mom was always right. And speaking of cake, one of the things she really looked forward to was when my husband Paul baked his special chocolate cake for her on every birthday, Christmas, and sometimes just because. She enjoyed each bite with a cup of coffee, and it always made her smile. She also loved hearing Kaylin sing, and Kaylin would perform song after song for her. And looking back, those moments feel like a gift, one we'll always treasure forever. Even though she's been gone 5 months, the thought of a world without Marilynn Carlisle still feels incredibly daunting. But I know exactly what she would want. For all of us to face this moment with the same faith and hope that guided her every single day. And in that spirit, I want to share the message I hold in my heart for her. Mom, your love shaped our lives, and your light will stay with us always. Thank you for every prayer, every laugh, and every moment. You were truly beautiful. And now my husband Paul wants to say a few words.
Of course, I lost it. Okay, sorry about that. If one word could describe Marilynn Carlisle, it would be really, really nice. Okay, that's 3 words, okay. Marilynn truly was one of the kindest and thoughtful people I've ever met. She was always positive, which put others around her in a similar and positive mood. Her and George were similar in this way, which created a synergistic force that created achievements they may have never expected when they met in high school. To many here, Marilynn was the best mom and grandmother one could ever want. I saw that. She always showed a genuine interest in who you were, what you were about, and she was sincere. She was an excellent listener and commented and offered advice, but only when warranted. As grandparents to our child Kaylin, Marilynn and George didn't waver. They showed enthusiasm, care, and energy that flattered Shelley and I as parents and makes our family feel very special to this day. Marilynn saying you'll be missed is an understatement, to say the least, and we're all proud and happy you're a big part of our lives.
Hi everyone, I'm Kelly Carlisle. I'm the 3rd kid, and this is my wife Nancy, and we have a few words to share. First of all, thank you so much for being here. It means so much. And friends and family who are watching and streaming, thank you as well. We appreciate that you're taking this time to honor Mom and be part of this celebration of her life. I was the 3rd kid. I was the one who wasn't told we were moving. I thought our time in Salem was a vacation, and you know, it still is just a great extended vacation being here, so love that. Of course, there are many things about Mom that we will all miss. But for me, the one most special thing about her was that sweet, simple, sturdy faith that was at the epicenter of her universe. It kept her buoyant and ever hopeful. She operated with that unyielding, blessed assurance that God was going to work things out. So I have a quick story to illustrate. Years ago, when our son Jeff went off for college in Minnesota, we sort of knew that we would be traveling there every December to hear him play in their Christmas concerts. And one of those years, Nancy and I thought it would be a great idea to take our parents along. And they loved that idea. Travel was a little bit difficult for them at this point, and so we offered to take care of all of the logistics, all the details. You just come along and we'll take care of it all, Mom and Dad and Nancy's mom. And so that's what they did. They got in the car, we took care of the rest. Mom took that invitation to the nth degree, apparently. She got in the car as we had asked. We drove to SeaTac Airport where we would meet Nancy's mother, and then we flew to Minneapolis. However, getting to SeaTac, we were about a mile away when Mom said, "I think I left my purse at home with all my ID and cards." Now, mind you, this was a few years after 9/11, when all the new security measures were rolled out and TSA was in no mood whatsoever to let people come through without proper identification. So you can imagine that as we're the ones saying, we'll handle all the logistics, we're sort of freaking out and wondering, how in the world is this going to happen now? In fact, I was convinced that the trip was over before it even began. But Mom, blessed assurance, said, "It'll be okay. I have my Bible with me, and my name is engraved on the front." I was wondering where this line of reasoning was going to take us. And Mom said, "If they don't believe that I am who I say I am, I'll just show them my Bible, and then I'll tell them my favorite Bible verse, Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, trust in the Lord with all your heart," etc., right? This was getting rich, and I was sure that I was giving more than a few eye rolls as she was saying all of this. There is simply no way that this is going to get us through security. But we really had no choice, and so it was sort of a Hail Mary. We thought we would see what would happen. Well, guess what? Her faith, her personally engraved Bible, and Proverbs 3, 5, and 6 not only got her through security at SeaTac to Minneapolis, but it got her through security from Minneapolis back to SeaTac. No ID whatsoever, just that blessed assurance. Over the years, we got to witness time and time again how deep and strong Mom's faith really was. And so I hope that it brushes off on all of us, that sweet, simple, sturdy faith is something we take with us as we go forward. Thank you.
The first time that I met Marilynn was in the parking lot outside Stewin Hall at Pacific Lutheran University. I was finishing my freshman year. Am I echoing?
You're fine.
Is it okay? Is it here? Sorry. I was wrapping up my freshman year in college, and so I was crazy about her son and nervous to meet both she and George. But she went out of her way to make me feel special. She kind of took my breath away. She gave me a piece of art she'd made. It was a pen and ink drawing of a single rose that was framed and matted with a very 1980s fabric. Probably many of us have them. It was very sweet. I cherished it, and I cherished her. But she never wavered in her kindness to me. She had a way of saying, "We'll work it out. And that optimism was a very big gift to me during some challenging years that I needed that encouragement. She always called me Nance. She never called me Nancy. It was always, hey, Nance. She always seemed to trust me, even when I didn't fully trust myself. She asked me to do the potatoes at holiday dinners. I mean, it was a big ask. So thank you, dear Marilynn, for loving me with kindness and generosity. I am so blessed to be loved by you.
Thank you, Jackson. Yeah. Jackson and Teresa Burgess are here from my church, and they were here for my dad's service as well, which I really appreciate. By the way, I'm pretty sure my mom had Nancy make those potatoes because I love Nancy's potatoes. But also, I was my mom's favorite. Now, my siblings aren't offended by that because they also know they were her favorite. And if you knew my mom, which many of you did, and if you didn't know my mom, if you would have known my mom, you would have known you also were her favorite. She had a way of making you feel very special, very loved. But I know that of all the children, I really was the favorite, and I'm saying that as a joke, and maybe some of you see me winking when I say I'm saying that as a joke, so I'm going to leave it at that. But one of the things that made me know I was her favorite is there was a few times when my mom got upset with me. And I don't remember her getting upset with any of the other children. And when she did, she'd say my name, and she didn't just say my name, she said my full name, which included my middle name, which was my great-grandfather's name, which I thought was a girl's name. And so the worst part about her saying my full name was depending on where she was, because if it was in the neighborhood, I didn't want the neighborhood kids to know that my middle name was Lynn, because I thought that was a girl's name. But yeah, she would say, Kevin, Lynn, Carlisle. Now, I challenge any of the siblings here, did she ever say your middle name? Did she ever say your name at all? No. And if she did say my full name, everybody was mad at me because they knew I'd done something pretty bad. I'll just tell you one story. I had a cousin named Johnny Knapp. He was a year older. He was brilliant. His mom was my dad's sister, Aunt Lou, and she and my mom had the same birthday, August 6th. I thought that should be enough to have things in common that I could have what Johnny had, because Johnny got to have a room full of reptiles, snakes. And they weren't just common snakes, they were from Africa. They were exotic snakes. And he actually had the food for the snakes, live food. I won't tell you much more about that. Also on the premises. I couldn't have any of those because I shared a room with Kelly. And his room had to be dust-proof. But I told her, snakes don't produce dust. They don't have dander. I did some research. But the real truth about the snakes is she didn't want me to have snakes. So I was like in third grade, and I found a way to get snakes. I went to the nearby field, and I'd put a board out, and they'd crawl under it after a few hours to get shade, and then I'd lift it up and stamp my foot down and put them in a big bucket. And one day I did this. I'd let them go later.
But I had to go use the restroom, and I decided I should keep them for a while, so I took them home, and I just set them down in the garage, and I forgot that they were in the garage. And a little while later, I heard, Kevin, Lynn, Carlisle. I think that's when her hair turned white. Probably not, I'm just joking. But anyway, my mom, I just need to tell you, after that happened, I don't remember the rest of the story. I think I blacked it out. I don't think I ever caught snakes again. But my mom, she taught me many things about life. She taught me to be a fighter. When I was in second grade, I was flunking math, and I didn't tell her, and the teacher didn't tell her, and I was shoving the papers behind the couch in the living room. F, F, F. She found them. I thought she would say, Kevin, Lynn, Carla, but you know what she did? She went out and bought flashcards, and in one night, I had all of the times tables memorized, and the next day, I got 100%. I don't think the teacher understood what happened because I was sitting around kids that were also flunking. I didn't cheat. And she and my dad were awesome together because she would say, you know, keep fighting, keep working at it. And my dad would say that too. But sometimes my dad would say, you know, there's a time where you just got to declare victory and leave. That's a great combination, right? Because you're still fighting when you declare victory and leave. You're just moving your venue somewhere else where it can be appreciated. My dad, he had boundaries. At least I thought he did. Had limits. But I'll tell you, a couple times I crossed his boundaries, crossed his limits, and I found out he was an iron-coated marshmallow. He was really just like my mom. And when I was in seminary, summer of I used to say 1900, none of your business, but 1981, it's a long time ago, I got to go to Israel on an archaeological dig, and I went to the same seminary where Chuck Schroe, our pastor here, went, and it was headed, the archaeological dig was headed by Dr. Glenn Rose, who was also Chuck Schroe's professor. It was really awesome to go to the same seminary where Chuck went. In fact, one time I checked out a book, and I signed it in the back, and it had only been checked out once before, 20 years earlier, by Chuck Schroe. And I thought, whoever wants this book must be brilliant. So I quoted it heavily in my paper. But, you know, the Schroes and my parents must have talked. And yes, I'm going to broaden things. I think I was also the Schroes' favorite. Because once they came here and met me, they stayed for the rest of Chuck's career. But my parents and the Schroes decided that they should get a group of people from this church, led by John Miscowie from the YMCA, and go to Israel just so they could visit me on the dig. I'm sure that's why. I'm going to tell you about that story and end with it in just a minute, but I want to say a couple serious things about my mom. Leonard Nimoy, who played Spock, there's this short quote that reminds me of my mom. He said, "The miracle is this, the more we share, the more we have." And I imagine that Leonard Nimoy transferred into Spock, went into the future, met my mom, watched the fruit of her life, and thought, this isn't logical. It's a miracle. And then he came back, went back into Leonard Nimoy, and Leonard Nimoy made the quote, because he knew that the fruit of my mom's life shows and demonstrates that the more you give, the more you have. The Bible talks about a spiritual gift called the gift of giving. It's a supernatural gift. We're all called to be givers, but some people are supernaturally gifted to give. That was her. I don't think I ever told her that. I wish I could have. Wish I would have thought of it. I just took it for granted. Amen. She's doing it right now. I believe right from heaven, God allows our loved ones to have some role in our lives. But back to the story about Israel. I was really excited when I knew they were coming to visit. And the way the dig worked, I was down in the Negev desert at Tel Hesi, about 2 hours away from Jerusalem, and we'd dig from Monday through Friday, or Thursday, and then on Friday, Saturday, Sundays we had time off, and I was going to meet up with them in Jerusalem. So I'm really excited about them coming, and I'm telling people in my cohort, especially Ruth and Dan, who are young people, about my mom. And I said, you know, when I was learning to walk, she told me that she had to run behind me because she wanted to make sure I didn't fall backwards. And when I realized she was doing that, I would purposely fling myself backwards at random times. And she said that she always caught me. My brother doesn't think she did. He thinks I fell on my head, but I'm sure she caught me every time. That's why I'm still brilliant. But I was telling this story, standing on this mound, man-made mound at Tel Hesi, instead of digging, had my trowel in hand. I told stories a lot of times. And Dan and Ruth were listening, and all of a sudden their eyes got big, and I turned around, and there's my mom and dad and Chuck and Penny. They had rented a car and drove out to the dig through these dusty little roads. That was a bold move. Of course, they were young back then, but my goodness. But right at the moment when I was talking about how my mom was always there for me, always catching me, I turned around and there she was. And that was God's way of reminding me of the blessing that she was, and that I was also God's favorite because he gave me her. But you know, God and my mom want you to know that you're God's favorite. And my mom would want us all to take comfort in that and know that however it works in heaven, her thoughts and love and prayers are for us. And the Lord is with us all, following us, going before us and behind us, surrounding us with his love. And you are God's favorite. And if I could, I'd give you all a button that says, I'm the favorite. And when you have pie later, interrupt somebody and tell them they're a favorite. Love you guys. Thank you.
Has arrived.
I'm Greg, Carrie's husband. I met Marilynn when I was in high school. My friend Steve Anderson really wanted Carrie and I to get together. And he and Carrie had a close friendship, and their parents were great friends. So Steve took me to visit Carrie at her home. By the time Marilynn answered the door, Steve and I were kind of messing around, wrestling, doing what teenage boys do. Marilynn loved to tell the story of trying to get our attention as we wrestled down the hallway. She called out, "Boys, boys, boys," as we tumbled past her. When we finally made it to the family room and stood up, Marilynn offered us warm chocolate chip cookies straight from the oven. I couldn't quite take it all in. Carrie was 16, Shelley, the youngest, was 4, Kevin and Kelly were somewhere in between. Their home was kind of full of chaos, noise, laughter, and the smell of chocolate chip cookies. As an only child, I was struck by it all. My home was quiet and structured, but Marilynn seemed energized and happy by all the fun chaos. Throughout the years, I learned home for Marilynn was about the people she loved. Eventually, their home began to feel like my home. I became a part of the family. Marilynn treated me like one of her own and started calling me Greggy, which was never something I really had wanted to be called. Until then. So the name was only used by Marilynn for me. And I knew that she used it to make me feel special, and it did. And she always called me that. If I came to their home at dinner time, Marilynn made sure there was a place at the table for me. If the family was going somewhere, she made it clear I was coming too. And of course I did. She always included me no matter what they were doing. I always felt at home. Years later, she and George gave me the opportunity to build their dream home. Marilynn was always talking about wanting a big dining room, so everyone could sit at the table together, a big kitchen where people could cook, have conversations, share laughter, drink coffee, and a large family room where everyone could relax and feel at ease. She didn't have a vision for a perfect house. She had a vision for the perfect home for her people. And it was. At the end of the day, the key was that Marilynn, along with George, had a rare gift. They made everyone feel at home because the two of them together were home.
When you realize that Greg was part of Mom's life for 54 years, and there was a point in there, I mean, he was so nice, you can tell, he's just nice. And I was a little feisty, so nice and feisty work well together. I had a lot of dreams, and so one time I thought, I should just check this out. And I asked Mom, if you had to make a choice, would you choose him or me? And this was Mom's answer. Well, she never went past that. So I'm assuming, no, we would just be chosen as a couple. I don't know. She was so supportive of that. And, Mom and I had a fun kind of relationship because I came when they were so young that I believed that I was, an adult. And at age 10, Mom and Dad had a little talk with me and told me I was a kid. I was hurt. So we went on and acted like we had not been that way. But Mom and I had a lot of fun discussions that lasted her whole life. And I miss having those conversations, and I have to tell you, I think she won. So I want to just tell you, this was the kind of conversations we had. First of all, I was the unofficial organizer for Mom. So I would always say, as a reminder, Mom, less is more. And she would say, but more is more. And we would go round and round. One time I had a sermon just for her about less is more. And as usual, she said, oh, it was fantastic. You were amazing. I'm so proud of you, but more is more. She finished that off. And then along the way, I realized that I had one of my favorite words was B-U-T, one T, but. And so I was telling Mom about it. I said, oh my word, I love this, the word but. And she says, no one loves the word but. And I said, I do. And she said, why would you love it? And I said, because you use it all the time. You always tell about all these things that we're going to have to do and things that are kind of hard. But when you use but, it's the turnaround. Then I know everything is going to be okay. So I'm not sure she ever thought that but was really should have been my favorite word, but we never finished that, so I'm going to say maybe I won on that, but here's why. Because after my dad passed, there was just a lot of loneliness, a lot of heartache, and she did really work at living well, and I think a lot of it was because all of us, and wanting to be here for all of us. And so we started going through the scriptures, and one that we just got stuck on a lot was the Apostle Paul wrote to the early church in Corinth, to the Corinthians. In his second letter, in chapter 12, verse 9, he tells us all these things that he's struggling with, making it very real. And then he says what God says, and you guessed it, it starts with but. It's the turnaround word. But, and this is what God is saying, my grace is sufficient. We went over and over that. We talked about the word is, love it. It's because it's an ongoing present. And we talk about that, God's grace is always present. So since Mom has passed, I thought I really need to ferret out the lessons that I learned as we were discussing all of that. So I'm going to give you 5 lessons of the many. Number 1, always make room at the table for more. I don't ever remember a moment when I wanted someone extra to be at our meal, or my siblings, that there was a no. It was always yes. More were welcomed. One time when I was in 3rd grade, she said that I could invite my closest friends for my birthday party, and we had a long walk home on our gravel road. And so she thought, oh, 2 or 3. So she made 12 cupcakes. We were on a strict budget, 6 so people could have 2 for the party and 6 for our family after our dinner. She looked down the road, and I took her up on it. I invited 35 of my closest friends. Later on, I finally realized why she almost had a heart attack when she saw 35 kids coming down, and she knew she had 12 cupcakes and there was no room at the table because 35 kids. So she thought quickly. She took 2 blankets and put them on the floor as our table, and she cut those cupcakes up so that we each had a quarter. And it was a fantastic party. And how she started us, she had me say each of the kids' names and what was special about them. And my feeling is that they had never had someone say how special they were around their tables. See, she didn't have enough, but she figured out a way. That is God's grace. The table is God's place of grace. It's in our faith and in our family. And then the second thing that she taught me, and this was profoundly told already, is that she talked about show up. She said that showing up was important. If someone invited you to something, there was a reason they invited you, and that you needed to try to show up, whether it was a birthday or a wedding or a shower or an awards ceremony or a game or a play. She did all of us kids, all of our grandkids, families probably showed up at some of your things because she believed that that was the most important thing. The third thing that was really important, she set the tone with her second language. You've heard about that language, laughter. She always, and Dad also, like you'd go have the living room talk, if you know what I mean, and I had a lot of living room talks because I had all these ideas that we had to talk through, and I thought they were good. And all of a sudden, they'd find a detail that just made them laugh. And at first, as a teenager, I would roll my eyes, oh, there they go again, they're laughing. But along the way, I discovered what a gift it was. In fact, last fall, she was super sick. And she was in the hospital, and we did not know she was going to make it. The doctor said it was questionable. And so my daughter Tricia and I were in the room, and I always asked the question, can I pray for you? She'd always say, you don't have to ask. But I always felt like I had to ask. And so she said yes. I felt like I prayed a really good prayer. But I thought I heard her say, that wasn't good enough. I said, what? Tricia repeated, that wasn't good enough, and was laughing practically on the floor. Mom started laughing. My brother Kevin came in. He was really laughing because, you know, the favorite. And so I did probably one of the best prayers that I've ever done. I did body, mind, soul, heart, everything. I was in it. And she responded, that was good enough. Phew. But you know what she did was that even though she was so sick, she did the other side and said, I'm still here. This is who I am. I speak the language of laughter. I believe that laughter is part of God's grace. It is sufficient for many times. Lesson 4, celebrate. You heard a little bit about that. You see, when we would have Thanksgiving, we were celebrating. You know, we had the turkey napkins, we had the turkey Hallmark, you know, fold a turkey onto the table, all that kind of stuff. It was really good. We're a pie-eating family, and the minute all the pie was served and we'd take the last bite, seriously, this really happened. And every Thanksgiving I thought, no, she's not going to do it. She would say, all right, it's Christmas. We need to get the tree out. We need to put the lights up. Let's get the decorations. We need to celebrate Christmas. And it was just this fast turnaround. And I'd always wonder, am I going to survive another holiday like that? But along the way, I realized what a great way to turn life around. So one of the best moments that I had with my parents and my family was when we lived in La Grande. Seriously, there's nothing to do when you don't have any money and you live in La Grande and your front yard is what now is known as I-84 and a railroad track is beyond that, and that your front yard is the way station for the trucks. So we, on Saturday afternoons, now some of you are going to have to check in with AI over this. I get it, so hang on. We had this great big television that was only in black and white, and it was kind of fuzzy, and we tuned in, you might want to look this up, American Bandstand. And I'm telling you, they had live bands on there that lip-synced their songs. It was really special, but Mom would get into a dress to dance in, and Dad and Mom would start dancing, and then us kids would start dancing. Sometimes we had to kind of help Kelly dance. He was pretty small, but we did it, and we danced that whole time until, I tell you, I always thought Saturdays were a celebration of dance. And that just changed the way I looked at life, because you can make a celebration out of the most ordinary moments. And finally, five that make such a difference because of grace, and that's this one. She taught me a great lesson of practicing grace every single day. Now, I have to confess as I end this, 3 weeks ago, I called my sister Shelley, and I said to her, I think I really annoyed our parents. And she said, you just figured that out? And I said, yes. Because here's what I did. I learned to pray at a very young age. You probably heard why, because my mom always prayed, and I was always praying. And when I was hitting first grade, I really believed that God said I was going to have a sister. So almost every day, from the time I was in first grade to the point that I was going into sixth grade, I had a little talk with him. And I would say, I'm going to have a sister. And every time they would say patiently, we're good with 3, and you have 2 wonderful brothers. I know, but I'm going to have a sister. And they never told me to stop saying that. They never got irritated with me. They just patiently told me. And then when we were in Beaverton, just a week or so before I was supposed to start 6th grade, and yes, we forgot to tell Kelly, so sorry, we moved to Salem. And Mom was expecting and due in October, just saying. And I began to saying, oh, I can't wait to see my sister. They were like, we don't know if it's a boy or a girl. But finally, they just gave in and said, we're going to have your sister. And then I had this vision in this new school that I didn't hardly know anyone, that I began telling them I was going to have a sister in October. And they're like, okay. And you'll know because I'll be wearing my new dress. We had no money, but my mom was a great seamstress. I don't even know how she did this. We're in this tiny hothouse, no air conditioning in those days. And the rooms were so small that all we could have was the beds, and we had one big dresser in the hallway. Our table hardly fit in, that you only had one side in the end. So every morning after breakfast, she put her sewing machine out. And she was, great with child, my sister, and she would work on that dress. 3 days before my sister was born, a well-made, beautiful dress, fully pressed, was hanging in my closet. When Dad returned, I was up because they had a neighbor lady watch us, and I didn't know the neighbor lady, so I was watching her. And when my dad came in, he said, your sister was born. I was so excited, I couldn't wait to get my dress on, and then my dad said, you don't need to go to school today. I'm wearing my dress to school. And then apparently he called Mom, and she said she's wearing her dress to school. And it took me a long time to understand that dress that she made that I know was so hard. Can you imagine just moving in a small house and new school for kids, and we're all confused, and one thinks he's on vacation, the whole thing. It was pure grace that she did that. And I've always thought of that moment. And you see, what I have learned from those lessons is that it's been really hard to think of my mom not here, but my grace is sufficient. My prayer is that we can continue maybe all of these lessons in our own life and reveal the kind of grace that is sufficient.
I'd like to invite the grandkids and great-grandkids up and invite all of us to take a look at the bulletins. Inside the bulletin, you'll see the words to Amazing Grace, one of Mom's favorite hymns. Can't think of a better way to kind of close up this service than to sing that together. We're going to start with the first verse with the grandkids and great-grandkids, and then the rest of us will chime in on the last two verses.
We really are so grateful for each one of you here, that you not only showed up, but you came with grace. You've had the ministry of presence, where you impact us so greatly that as each one of you walked in, the very atmosphere changed because you're here. And I know for sure that Mom would want me to tell you that you are amazing and that you have changed her life in many ways, and we thank you so much for that. Now, I have to tell you, if you've not caught on, we are a pie family. And Mom's favorite kind of pie, the kind that, you could offer it to her and get something out of her, like it was kind of a bribe, was Marion Berry. So that's for sure one of the pies that will be downstairs. We'd love you to come down and visit and have pie. We've also made for you a card with her most favorite scripture from Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, with her name on it as a reminder to you that nothing is lost and everything is gained when you trust in the Lord. May you be blessed beyond measure. Thank you.
Beloveds, following the benediction, the family at the front will be invited to go to the pie party first to get downstairs, and all our usher Orrin will come forward and then dismiss the remaining pews so we can all make our way. There's an elevator towards the parking lot entrance and stairs both directions. I invite you to stand as you're able, in body and in spirit, and to receive this blessing as you go. By the goodness of God, you were brought forth into this world. By the grace of God, you've been kept all the day long, even unto this hour. And by the love of God, revealed in the life of Marilynn, we know a bit more about a beautiful God, full of love and laughter, creativity, generosity, and faith. Trusting in that beautiful God, let us pray for one another more. Let us love one another with that beautiful love that will not let us go. Go with peace and pie and celebration.